Whew, I've been a bad girl in this festival. Hi, it's your local Dragon Lady here, and as I record this, the Rarity Festival is still going on in Master Duel, although it is going to end at any hour, seeing that today is the last day for the festival. And, well, I figure I would show what deck I've been playing with just to get around, I guess, the ban list that Konami set for this particular festival. Now, in the XC Festival, a lot of people were playing self-TK decks to try to exploit the medal system, although Konami nipped that in the bud pretty quickly, so it does make sense to win more duels than it is to lose them. But they also caught on to the fact that a lot of people were using burn decks, just burning your opponent down with simple strategies like Nurse Burn, Samoji, and that sort of thing. So for this festival, they decided to eliminate most of those cards, but that did not stop me from trying to make a very mean, restricting burn style deck. Now, for this festival, you're only allowed to use normal and rare cards. So what I did is I took my very toxic Ice Lemonade deck, as I like to call it, and just make some minor adjustments to it, which was pretty easy because most of the cards I used were rare or normal cards anyway. So I'm just going to quickly run through the deck, what it does, and you can sit back and enjoy some replays that I caught during the festival, because this deck really does punish you for doing any combos, for attacking, just all sorts of really mean things. It's still a very toxic deck, and if I don't win the duel, I certainly frustrated my opponent, because I've had some people who just, when they saw I had laid down the back row, they just surrendered. They weren't going to bother with it, which I don't blame them. So, first thing I did is I added 3 copies of Battle Fader. We know what this does. If your opponent were to attack you directly, this is in your hand, you special summon it and it ends a battle phase right away, so this is good for defense. I have 3 copies of Spirit Reapers. This card cannot be destroyed by battle, so another good form of defense. 3 copies of Marshmelon. Same thing, it cannot be destroyed by battle. However, you place it face down. If your opponent attacks into it, it flips up, and your opponent will get burned for 1,000 damage. So that is burn damage. I also added 3 copies of the Obnoxious Celtic Guardian. It cannot be destroyed by battle with a monster that has 1900 or more attack. And that happens more often than you might think. Your opponent's going to try to get really big monsters to swing for a game. If this guy's face down, they don't know what it is, they're going to swing into it, and good defense. I mean, it doesn't burn anything, but it keeps your game going. 2 copies of Toll. It's a permanent magic card, and your opponent must pay 500 life points in order to declare an attack. So if they have a full field of monsters out and they want to attack into you, they got to pay 500 for each time. Now, if you get your opponent burned down low enough, and they have a full field of monsters, and if they cannot pay, they cannot attack. And this has actually happened a couple of times. 3 copies of Ring of Destruction. I have gotten a few opponents with this too, or at least burn them down to a very uncomfortable life point level. So during your opponent's turn, you can target one face-up monster they control that has an attack that is less or equal to their current life points, and you can destroy it, and you do burn damage to both you and your opponent. But if you have plenty of life points to spare, this is not a big problem at all. For draw power, I have 3 copies of Jar of Greed, so I can draw a card during my opponent's turn. Same thing with Legacy Yatagarasu. Draw a card during my opponent's turn. You want to get through this deck as fast as you can to dig deep for the good cards. And here comes more mean stuff. 3 copies of Skull Invitation. So each time a card is sent to the graveyard, you can inflict 300 points to the owner of that card sent. So you gotta be careful with this one, because this can inflict you as well. And it has. It really has. It's made me uncomfortable a couple of times, but it is such a good card because it's for any card. Coffin Cellar. Each time your opponent sends a monster card to their graveyard, they are burned for 300 damage. And this is actually can be even more devastating than Skull Mutation, because if your opponent were to link off, it requires a monster, if they go to the grave, they get burned. If they detach a material from an XC monster, it gets burned. Synchro, get burned. Fusion, get burned. You destroy one of the monster cards, you know, via the Ring of Destruction, they get burned. It's just a ridiculous card. Now, this is something I didn't have in my original build 3, Curse of Darkness. Again, a lot of cards I had to replace. Curse of Darkness is a rare card. Each time a magic card is activated, immediately after it resolves, that player takes 1,000 damage. So you are not, well, I'm sorry, I'm not using barely any magic cards. I only have 2, so I always make sure this is already active before I activate Curse of Darkness. So my opponent, if they're going to be using a lot of magic cards, I've had 2 of these activated at one point, so they had to, you know, they were burned 2,000 life points for each magic card they activated. 2 copies of Phantom Knight's Fogblade. This is a really good card, even if you're not playing Phantom Knights, because what happens is this: you basically you target opponent's monster, an effect monster. You negate the effects and they cannot attack. And that's all you care about with this deck. If you can negate their effects and prevent them from attacking into you, especially when you're in a bind, this is really good. And it can also stop the monster's effects that could probably add to their hand. Especially summon more cards, doesn't really matter. 3 copies of Toll Hike. This is really funny in conjunction with the regular Toll. Regular Toll requires you to pay 500 life points. Toll Hike, in order to declare an attack, they have to send 1 card from their hand to the graveyard. And, well, you can activate multiple copies of Toll Hike. So if you have 2 or 3 activated, that means they have to send 2 cards or 3 cards to the grave just to attack. And if they have no cards in hand or not enough to finish the game, they can't attack. They cannot attack. So this is another card that can prevent your opponent from playing, you know, if the circumstances are correct. And of course, my personal favorite, Soul Levy. You can only activate 1 at a time, but each time a monster or monsters is special summoned, your opponent must mill the top 3 cards from their deck to the graveyard. So if they're playing a deck that's combo heavy, going through, you know, trying to link off, synchro into a bunch of monsters, you could either get rid of, you know, maybe half of their deck, or maybe their entire deck, depending on how often, you know, they're special summoning. And this can also limit your opponent from special summoning as well, because they don't want to lose half their deck. And the great thing about having any combination of these cards activated, your opponent is going to want to get rid of them ASAP. So they're going to burn through resources, you know, more than they want to, or sooner than they should, to try to get rid of these. And it could probably limit what plays they have left. Plus, you have your defense. So even if they were to, you know, okay, get rid of my Soul Levy, get rid of my Coffin Settler, get rid of my Curse of Darkness, they still got to get around my monsters, my defense. So they burn through the resources. So anyway, what's this mean? Absolutely. So this is the deck I played. Festival's almost over, but yes, so sit back and enjoy some of these replays, because it will demonstrate how restricting and annoying this deck can be. So have fun! Now that you've seen this deck in action, remember, be a good sport. Play the game, not the fame. See ya!